Welcome to the Articulated Points podcast. I'm Phillip Donnelly. With me is Patrick Stewart. He's my co-host, he's my cohort, he's my co-conspirator.
This is our first episode. I am excited. How about you, Phil?
Excited, a little bit nervous, but we're going to see how this goes. This is a new thing for both of us. We're going to be making mistakes. We're going to be learning along the way, and hopefully as this podcast keeps going, you're going to see it evolve into a much more professional-looking production, because we're doing this by the seat of our pants right now.
That's right. Phil's going to say a bunch of dumb stuff. I'm going to say a bunch of dumb stuff, but hopefully in the midst of that, there's going to be a bunch of smart stuff, and we will be sharing some things that we've learned along the way in toy collecting, mostly G.I.Joe, but some other things as well. What other things might we cover, Phil?
Transformers, Star Wars, other 3 3/4-inch action figures, maybe even something that doesn't have to do with toys at all.
We're going to see Disney parks, I imagine, because well before this, there is actually, we might as well mention your YouTube channel, correct?
If you want. It's a pokey little thing of me just doing point-of-view ride films from Disneyland and California Adventure. I grew up in the area. It's been a part of my life. I literally would go to sleep hearing fireworks every night. So it's kind of hard to ignore.
Yeah, I actually have to think that you should give yourself more credit than that. I enjoyed the Lincoln one that you did because it was very much showing everything from start to finish, the entire experience. So for somebody like me who hasn't been there, it kind of shows me what I might see if I were to go to that. In addition, I like the fact that it archived things for future generations. But regarding our podcast, we're mostly going to be talking about G.I. Joe first. Is that correct?
Yeah. We're going to be another G.I. Joe podcast first and foremost, but we don't want to be just a G.I. Joe podcast.
Or even just a podcast. I mean, we could be almost anything. Like, it's weird to be on YouTube and be constantly calling ourselves a podcast.
We're a video cast.
We're a video cast, yes.
But yeah, we're going to be very much focused on toys, but, we are human. We have interests outside of just one thing, and we thought we might be able to show that to you guys from time to time, because we think you might like it too.
We probably should mention, just for the sake of everybody kind of knowing how this podcast came to be, or if we want to call it a podcast, Philip lives on the West Coast. I live on the East Coast, but I work very, very late. And so we would come home and we'd be online talking G.I. Joe, and eventually I think Philip said, "Hey, do you want to just Skype?" And I said, "Okay, let's Skype." And how long have we been Skyping, Phil?
I want to say since 2011?
Yeah.
Maybe even earlier?
It's probably been that long. And sometimes you and I are sharing great information. Like, you come up with stuff, and I'm just like, this is, amazing. And then I'm showing you stuff sometimes as well. And we just kind of thought, you know what, we probably should just let other people in on this. So it's almost just like an attempt to let other people see what we're talking about.
We're showing off our show and tell.
Yes, yes, exactly. We're showing our show and tell. Okay, what do we have up first?
So, if you're in the know about 1982 figures, you already know that you've got your thick thumb and you have your thin thumb variations. But there's something else we found out.
Yes, and I have to confess that the first time that this was brought to my attention, it wasn't something that I noticed. It was brought to my attention, and I kind of thought, that's nothing, that's just the factory being the factory, and mistakes happen. I mean, we could go, and I have a box of really cool error figures as well, because while I see errors as separate things from variations, they're actually a lot of fun in their own right. And whenever I first saw one of these, I actually thought, well, that's just somebody at the factory who made a mistake. But then more of them popped up, and then things kind of didn't make sense that it was an error. I don't necessarily think that with variations that you can say, okay, after we've seen X number of them, therefore it is a variation. That's not the case. But when you start to see multiples of the same thing show up, I think it then warrants further investigation. And that was certainly the case in this, and again, brought to my attention by a very dedicated 1982 collector Not sure if he wants to stay named or not. What do you think?
If he wants to out himself, let's let him do it in the comments.
Okay, that's what we shall do, because I really owe it to him, because he mentioned it to me on more than one occasion, and after he mentioned it to me, actually, another figure, why don't we show people what it is? There is Zap, as we all know him, and here is the Zap that I was shown by another collector, and I kind of just thought, well, you know, that's weird, but it's got to be a mistake. You know, it's another straight arm Zap, and there we go. Take a look at that rivet.
Oh yeah, the rivet is inverted. It's backwards. And here's the Zap I have. You compare.
Okay, so there they are. You can see that this Zap has inverted rivets, but the interesting thing about him is the fact that his forearms are also a different color green. These inverted rivets seem to be some kind of in-between step prior to this, because as you may recall, Zap in 1983 also has a change in color to the forearms.
Yeah, and it's that same color on this inverted rivet Zap, but an important distinction, the swivel arm Zap has different molds for the lower arms, and we're seeing that these inverted rivet Zaps, they still use the molds of the straight arms. They have a little cut in there for the elbow that was not transferred over to the swivel arm figures. So this is not the swivel arms being put onto a straight arm figure. This is an intentional change in the plastic.
So it definitely seems that these ones were kind of the what other people are calling the transitional figure. All of these are a little bit of a transition, but this is definitely a step between 1982 and 1983. These have to be late 82 changes for the way that they fall in line chronologically when you look at the actual variations. But that happened on Zap, and I was shown that, and I thought, well, you know, that's probably some sort of mistake, and I actually probably should have given it more thought. But when you see one figure, that's really not enough to say, oh, I know that that's a variation. But then another Zap popped up, and then it got even more interesting because another figure popped up, Stalker. And Stalker is the exact same situation. He is that lighter green plastic, and the forearms are the darker or brighter, more vibrant green that you might see on the 1983 figure. But again, you know, it is not switched out forearms because the mold is a different mold. That's just not a possibility. So these are definitely some 1982 figures with different forearms. And yes, through the process of us trying to uncover these, we have seen some of these things carded. So they are out there.
What I think is actually kind of amusing is that with Stalker, it's actually kind of harder to see because the camouflage on the forearms is actually doing its job.
Yeah, that's...
You have less plastic that's visible.
That's true, but I think that it was the light green plastic that was very distinct from the upper arm that was noticed. And again, I don't know if I should be mentioning names, but that wasn't noticed by me. It was another collector that I know very well, and he said, hey, I know you're looking into that Zap. Here's a Stalker that has the same thing. And the other thing that really should be noted about these figures is that the forearm color and the rivet are not the only difference on them. They are actually different from head to toe in most cases. I really honestly can't see anything that is the same. Whenever you open them up, they're different on the inside. They don't quite fit the same as another figure. We do know that between the thick thumbs and the thin thumbs that there is a change internally to the entire figure, but this is a change that would have happened after that as well. So very interesting.
For those of you who don't know, between the thick thumb variation and the thin thumb variation, the chest cavities are actually retooled a bit so that you can't easily switch arms in between. On one set, the arms will be extremely loose and just kind of wobble there. If you put it on the other set, you won't be able to close the chest properly.
I would have to say that one of the things that has made collecting these very, very difficult is the fact that there probably isn't another year in G.I. Joe 3 3/4 inch where more figures are cobbled together piece by piece. There are so many figures with broken thumbs that 1982, it's just, you know, it's perfectly common for somebody to have at their house a bag full of rock and roll parts. And where they eventually find a good left thumb and a good right thumb, they put them together and make a nice looking figure and pick out the best paint on the chest and the best paint on the head and which parts aren't yellowed as much, and go, okay, there's my 1982 rock and roll. But all those parts didn't necessarily come together originally, and so finding ones that are unchanged and original parts is very, very difficult. That is why I would love it if some carded collectors out there were watching this and said, oh, you know what, I'll help. I'll look through my carded collection, and I will find all of the reverse rivet figures and report what the accessories look like, because there are differences in accessories, and what the rest of the figure looks like. I will note, though, that in all of this, I have, you know, because we've been tracking these for a while, I've rarely seen anything broken. Have you come across any of them that have broken parts?
We found one broken shoulder, and just today I found a stalker with a broken crotch, but not the lower arms and their thumbs.
Yeah, that is so weird. It's like whatever they did, they actually did figure out something that prevented thumbs from breaking. Like they are perfecting that system with a change from the thin thumbs to the thick thumbs, and then again to these, you know, forearms that are different plastic. And we also kind of have a lot of conjecture as to why the rivets were swapped the other way around. My guess, and it is just a guess, is that the plastic being a little bit different, it may have made it secure. The other guess that I think that you may have proposed, Philip, was the fact that it just looks better. And it is true. It's very true.
Yeah, if you look at the silhouette of a straight arm figure, you've got those little rivets just kind of sticking out outside of the elbow.
Yeah.
When you flip the rivet around, it actually kind of lays flat and looks more natural. And I think that's why rivets remained flipped for the remainder of the line. They don't have the solid part sticking out anymore. It's always been the solid parts on the inside of the elbow. And I think that's just, you know, mainly an aesthetic reason is why it kept it that way.
So you're late in the 82 run, and we know that some things actually started off later in 82 than other things. Those things that started later were Scarlet and the three Cobra figures. So that's four figures that are kind of in question.
Also, Steeler and the Mobat.
Steeler and the Mobat, yeah, it did come a little bit later, but not as late. And Steeler and the Mobat, definitely the swivel arm was released in 1982. That would make it more difficult for them to, or that would make it less likely that they would have needed to change it. So that's kind of our point. You have Scarlet, the three Cobras, and probably Steeler.
So we saw Zap, we saw Stalker, and so we figured we have to start looking for others. And now we don't think the Cobras, and we don't think Scarlet and Steeler have them. But we fully admit we can't prove that. You can't prove a negative.
Yeah.
So if a sample ever actually does show off, we'll happily amend that.
Yeah, we also have to really scrutinize that sample if it shows up, because I want to almost say it right now. Sometimes crazy things have shown up, but they've shown up from the hands of somebody from Hasbro, and sometimes that means that it was a sample. I know that a 9-back Scarlet is nearly impossible to find, and if a 9-back Scarlet does show up, I'm always curious where it came from, because I think the word is still out whether or not that actually ever went to retail, or whether or not it is something that actually was sent as a sample and then never ended up shipping.
So we started digging into this, and we started looking around primarily on eBay, because that's easily your most accessible source for finding things. And we found Grand Slam. We found...
I actually found Grand Slam while digging locally, but that's okay.
We found Rock and Roll. We found Snake Eyes.
Snake Eyes, everybody's favorite. That one I was afraid of.
Yeah. We found Flash. We found Short Fuse. We found Hawk. And so far, I am the only one who has found Grunt. Your ability to find these definitely seems to vary by character. If you're keeping track, though, you'll notice I haven't mentioned two figures, Breaker and Clutch. And there's a reason for that.
Here we go. There is the arm in question. So there you can see that I have the arm of Breaker right up there so you can see it. I'm holding it against a Rock and Roll just so that you can see that it's not Rock and Roll's arm, because those are a different color green, as everybody knows. So we are actually looking at Breaker's arms. Unfortunately, if you flip Breaker around, that is not an inverted rivet. And if you look at Breaker from above, you can see a gap in his shoulder, which that tells us several things that we were just talking about earlier. It tells us that this is not the original figure that this arm was on. So it's a little bit of a question, since the arms of Breaker and of Clutch are exactly the same. It makes me wonder, well, you know, is this a Clutch arm or is it a Breaker arm? It definitely was something that was popped on this figure, maybe from a bag of parts. Maybe it was a broken thumb and somebody popped one on. I do question why it would have been removed from the other figure. You know, did the O-ring break? Did the other thumb break? Which, if that's the case, that seems a little bit weird, since we haven't actually seen that happen on these figures yet. So I don't know whose arm this is. It belongs to one of two figures, or it could go to both. There could actually be both of them rattling around out there in the wild.
Yeah, it's kind of like Short Fuse and Hawk. On their own, you can't necessarily tell which is which. But fortunately, we know those both exist.
Yes, for sure.
With Clutch and Breaker, it's up in the air. We've just got an arm to go off of.
I actually was surprised at how common Short Fuse seems to be. Like, finding a Short Fuse is not... Like, I'm hoping that what people don't do after we mention this is just go crazy looking for these things. Not all these are really all that hard to find. Short Fuse, I've passed up.
And Rock and Roll.
Short Fuse and Rock and Roll are just very, very... and to be honest, I think Hawk and Grand Slam. Short Fuse, Hawk, Grand Slam, Rock and Roll, very, very common.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't even mention how common some of these things are. I just want to point out that some of these were very, very easy to find. You'll have an easier time
finding some.
Yes.
Yes.
Some of these are easy to find. So don't go crazy buying them. Or go crazy buying them. I don't know. Whatever you want to do, you're going to do.
You know, we're not in charge of the economy.
That is right. We are not in charge of the economy. If we were in charge of the economy, I would tell everybody to sell me your G.I. Joes and sell them cheap.
Don't pay more than you can. Don't pay more than you think you should. I think after a while, hopefully this video and other sources will spread the news of these rivets far and wide, and whatever initial collector rush dies down, and maybe in a year or two, they won't be that hard to find for very expensive prices.
If you're looking at these, and it's just a single figure in a picture on eBay, you're not going to notice anything on any figures, probably other than Stalker and Zap, and that's it.
It's more noticeable on Zap and Stalker, and I think there's a reason why we noticed it on Zap first. He's got the most drastic change and the most visible change.
Okay, moving on, we have a Sparta and Cops box set. Philip, that is all you.
Alright, so back at the 2016 JoeCon, I was sitting in on the Joe Declassified panel, and it was mentioned that someone once opened the Argentinian Cops box that a lot of international figures were repackaged in over there, and you know, they've been told that you get a figure and then you get 10 accessories, and what those accessories are is totally up to the whims of whoever packed that box. I was on that panel. They specifically mentioned that one of the accessories was an entirely separate figure. So that got to me thinking, okay, so I've been seeing a bunch of these still sealed on eBay for not too bad a price. Why wouldn't it be fun to open up one on camera and see what we get? And so I did that.
Okay, let's take a look.
Here it is. As you can see, it's still wrapped in its plastic. So what I plan to do is actually open this up on camera, and then both you and I can discover what this has together. Let's see if we get something fun. Alright, I've got my Sparta boxed figure here, and as you can see, it's still wrapped in plastic. Here's the M32 pulverizer that South American Sparta figures tended to come with, but what we're interested in is this contents 10 pieces bit on the corner here. So let's open it up and find out what we got. Alright, pulling off the plastic here. Gotta make it look like I actually know what I'm doing when I'm cutting with the razor blade. Let's set that aside for now. Alright, so we have another pulverizer, another pulverizer, yet another pulverizer, still one more pulverizer, most of a flamethrower pack rat, and 2 shields. So, there you go. It really comes down to, you know, whatever is in the factory at the time that they're just kind of thrown together. She's not going to be short on weaponry, that's for sure. That's your little international figure snippet of the day. Wah, wah.
Yeah. Well,
I've got a pack rat I can't really use on its own, and I have a whole lot of guns that are the same type. But, silver lining, I did manage to complete a TNT figure with using that P32 or M32 pulverizer.
well, that's very handy. It's a shame that, you know, all of the rare accessories weren't just, you know, packed in one box for you to find. Not that that's a rare accessory, but it would be nice if just every single figure that you needed to complete happened to have the accessories in there. Have you figured out what to do with the incomplete pack rat yet?
I leave it in a case with the rest of my Brazilian figures, because I don't know what I'm doing with it. It just kind of sits there. It's missing, you know, the treads, what it sits on. So it just kind of wobbles on the ground. It's it's hilarious.
Well, it's battle damaged, right?
Personally, I was pulling for a another figure, because, you know, I'm greedy like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So do we want to mention anything else about those cops boxes?
If you want to know more about it, ask us in the comments. We're always looking to have feedback, because we want to get your opinions on what we're doing. We want to know if, you know, what we're doing is working for you, and if you got questions, we're happy to answer either in the comments or maybe even in a future episode.
Yeah, it's kind of like a really old version of one of the blind bags or blind boxes that are so prevalent on toy shelves today. So maybe they were ahead of themselves, ahead of the times. You know, you got to open that thing up and find disappointment, just like so many kids do today.
All they forgot to do was establish what the rarity would be.
That's very true. That's very true.
So, my cops set was a bit of a bust, but, you know, that's how it goes when you're gambling on toys. But what we find sometimes is those gambles pay off. And in this case, it was a gamble with McDonald's toys overseas. See, a few years back, I had been getting a little bit more into Transformers, and I know that for Transformers Armada and for Transformers Cybertron, McDonald's in the US had Transforming Optimus Prime figures, and I tracked those down. Well, if you know your Transformers, you know that those series were the first and third parts of a trilogy of cartoons. The middle one was called Transformers Energon. There wasn't a McDonald's line released for that in this country. Outside of the US, in Europe, and I think actually there's a separate line released in Australia, they did put out Transformer figures, and there is an Optimus Prime that transforms as a McDonald's Happy Meal toy. So that got me thinking. Action Man. Specifically the 12-inch 90s to 2000s incarnation that Hasbro produced alongside G.I.Joe figures over here. We got a line of 8 McDonald's toys over here. Not that great. Most of them were gimmick driven, But there were about 2 figures in that line that were kind of decent 3 3/4 inch action figures. And the head sculpts on there are closer to Action Man from that toy line than either of the 2 official Hasbro figures we've gotten. The Night Force figure from 2004, just a repainted tracker, doesn't really look like Action Man at all. And the Revolution box set figure that came out last year, based on the IDW comic look, which, again, doesn't look so much like the Action Man you picture in your head. So I got to thinking, well, if Europe had its own line of Happy Meal toys, and Action Man was a lot more popular in Europe than it was over here, they got a lot more toys, and they went for a lot more years than we got. I got to wondering, maybe they got Happy Meal figures.
Excellent thought process. I actually, when you first brought this to me, I really thought that there was no way that you were going to find much at all. That you'd found 1 or 2 things, no big deal, because on JoeCustoms.com, that Action Man head that was from the one of the figures released at McDonald's in the United States was really popular for quite some time for popping the body off and putting it onto an old O-ring figure body. If you go to Joe Customs, you probably in their archive can still find a lot of figures that use that head. I can specifically remember really enjoying one that I think that it was Chad Smelser, maybe it was Matt, who had done a custom. It was one of theirs. They do great stuff. And I remember seeing that head on there. And so when you brought these to me, I thought, there's no way that there's that much of that stuff, because if there was, I would have seen it already. That's kind of what my thought was, because there was a little bit of interest in these things. So what did you end up finding?
Well, first things first, these are the 2 figures we got over here. Out of a toy line of 8 figures, we got 2. And you can see some nice, decent head sculpts. They've only got swivels side to sides.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah. The others were gimmick driven. They were molded into like vehicles or
Right.
just, not very useful.
So out of a toy line of
product.
eight toys, 2 of them were figures. Is that right?
2 of them, yeah, 2 of them were usable action figures.
Mm-hmm.
They've got shoulder and neck articulation. That's it. They don't even have a waist articulation. That's how limited they are. But I thought it was worth looking into, and what I found surprised me. It turns out there were a lot of Happy Meal toys that came out in Europe, and it's surprising how little of it is known over here. I mean, it's just baffling. You're going to see. It's crazy. And I should also point out, McDonald's wasn't the only fast food joint that put out toys.
So in this case, Happy Meal is kind of the general term because McDonald's has popularized it, but there was another place or 2 that put out also kids meal toys?
Well, so far I've only found 1.
Okay.
This was a place in France called Quick.
Quick.
And their version of a Happy Meal is called a Magic Box. Now, Quick, Magic Box, Action Man, these are not great search terms when you're trying to find something specific.
Yeah.
But you can track them down. So they actually did 2 lines of Action Man figures. One came out in 1996, one came out in 1997. And their gimmick is actually pretty interesting.
These are really cool. Honestly, every time you were showing these to me, I was kind of blown away that you just kept on uncovering more. I thought, well, he found a wave, but then you just kept on being like, no, there's this set, and, show us a few of them.
This is the first wave. Look at that. These are 3 3/4 inch. I can't call them action figures because they have no joints. These are statues. But their gimmick is that you can clip on accessories to them. And they're very true to the Hall of Fame bodies that were being used at the time. I mean, that's like straight out of 1993. This guy even has flocked hair.
So the hair's actually flocked.
Yes, on this particular one. An underwater scuba diver, he's got the hair slicked back. His is not flocked. This is the most weirdest of the three, if only because he's kind of pre-posed and not more of a neutral position like the other two. But you can see here, I've got the visor on his helmet clipped on. And that's how they worked. Here's the 1997 line. You've got the parachuter. You've got an astronaut. My astronaut is not complete. He was the only one of the 6 I could not find bagged. That's an interesting thing. You can find these bagged still. But again, you have to wade through the very generic search terms. And also, a Dr. X. And he's got the hand that pops out, just like this particular iteration of the figure did, and the other 2 missiles that strap to his leg. These are all very faithful to the accessories the 12-inch comes with. They're essentially the 12-inch figure in miniature, just as a statue. Now, the reason I actually started looking for these figures was because I wanted to see if I could find a Dr. X action figure. Because, you know, Hasbro had given us Action Man toys. We've got these 2 guys right here. But we never got anybody for them to fight against. I wanted a Dr. X. I found a Dr. X, but I kept looking. And then I found out that while Quick may have been first, they were definitely not the last. McDonald's took over, and McDonald's, well, they went for another 6 years, uninterrupted. The first wave of Action Man toys from 1998 from McDonald's, kind of disappointing, kind of in line with what you think of as an McDonald's Happy Meal toy, just kind of a big, bulky hunk of plastic with an action feature. This one, you know, is a wind-up, and he shuffles across the ground. And also kind of disappointing, this guy is huge. If you were probably to spread him out properly, he'd be like a 6-inch figure. But then I noticed the next year that came out, we started getting something somewhere. Take a look at this Dr. X. He's a 3 3/4-inch figure. He's got action features. There's, you know, a little hand here so he can slam his fist down. His hand originally lit up, but being a 20-year-old action figure with a button battery glued inside him, it is, you know, understandably died. But that is a Dr. X action figure. There was another figure in that wave. This is the Parachute Action Man. You might notice a similarity with the Quick figure. Now the colors on him are a little bit different, but if you were to look at him close, you'll notice there is camouflage sculpted in on his limbs. Camouflage that is painted on here. These are based on the same 12-inch figure. They both have working parachutes. This one is cloth, this one is vinyl. But they both have the goggles, the breathing, the air mask is right there on his chest. It's on his face. The harness is molded on as opposed to a separate piece. It's hilarious that this is a take on 2 different concepts of the same action figure from 2 different fast food companies. I think that's fascinating. The moment you started looking internationally for Action Man McDonald's Happy Meal toys, the floodgates kind of opened. This figure from, I think, 2000, he came with a bunch of sticks, plastic sticks, you could peg together to form a raft or even like a lean-to. But the figure himself turns at the neck, turns at the shoulder, turns at the hips. This is your 5-point of articulation figure. This is like basic standard articulation that you would get from, Kenner at the time. This is a full-fledged action figure. Some of these things get incredibly ridiculous. There is one wave of figures from, I think, 2001, where it's probably my favorite wave of action figures to begin with. Every figure in that particular set is a winner. This is one Happy Meal toy, mind you. You get an action figure, again, 5 points of articulation, full action figure. He comes with his own little go-kart. Free spinning wheels. The roll cage folds off. He's got a little molded in dashboard. The character can sit in this figure, in this vehicle. This is a Happy Meal toy. We're getting screwed. This is all one toy. We're getting screwed over here, man.
Yeah. I will say that I don't like getting 5-point of articulation G.I. Joes, you know, in with my vehicles and in with, you know, regular retail packages. But it does seem a little bit odd that, you know, so much of retail now is 5 POA. And this thing existed a long time ago, and it's just like a hidden fact, a hidden gem of G.I. Joe history.
And if you thought that was impressive, it's just amazing the size of these things. This guy, he's only got 3 points, shoulders and neck, but he comes with this gigantic plastic glider.
Gigantic too. Like you showed me that thing, and the main thing that I was wondering whenever I saw that was what did the box look like that they sent the fast food chain? You know, because it seems like anytime fast food chains have these, they're almost annoyed with how crazy whatever gimmicky thing it is that they have to deal with. And the box for that had to be huge.
And I will point out that some of these have the old cardboard box Happy Meal. This particular wave had to have the paper bag. You know, it's not going to fit in the cardboard box. But, you know, it's a functioning glider. It's not a great functioning glider, but it's a functioning glider.
It's a functioning glider that may, unfortunately, be more sturdy than some other gliders that we've purchased in our lifetimes.
Now, from the same wave of that Action Man with the go-kart comes this Dr. X action figure. And he's kind of badass. He's 5 points of articulation. He comes with a friggin' wrecking ball, spite, and his arm has a little reveal feature of, you know, the internal mechanism inside. If you want Dr. X action figures, you are going to get Dr. X action figures. From Quick, we've got this late 90s model. From McDonald's, we've got another late 90s model. Ponytail, eye patch, big mustache. I love that look. Based off, you know, Hall of Fame Gung Ho's head sculpt. You get your 2000 CG series with moving claw, Dr. X. You get this one I've seen, I've already showed you. You've gotten this guy. I love this dual bandoliers thing going on. He doesn't quite have the same amount of articulation, but he's still got pretty good going on. And I love the mutton chops. I love the look. He's probably my favorite look of the McDonald's action figures for Dr. X. This is probably my favorite overall because he's got the more intricate leg articulation, but this guy's really close. He came with a missile launching radar station. Another one of my favorite Action Man figures is this guy. He's an Arctic Action Man. He's actually got knee articulation in addition, so he's one of two most articulated Action Man figures that Happy Meals came out with. He comes with a snowmobile, and not just that, the front skis, and on the back he has ski poles and skis. This again was the 2001 wave with the go-kart and that Dr. X with the wrecking ball.
That just see, that's part of what amazes me, that these things weren't well known already, because in 2001 G.I. Joe collectors were very, very eager for anything that we could get that was G.I. Joe related, and Action Man certainly fits the bill.
You can basically get, you know, a Dr. X and a decent Action Man to go with it, and the head sculpt's changing along with the years, that and his look changed along with the action figure, and it just kept up to date. And so there's a lot of usable head sculpts here if you want to transplant it onto a G.I. Joe body. You'll notice though he's still kind of light on villains. If you ever watched or collected the 12-inch Action Man TV series or the figures, you'll know there were other villains he faced off against. So I started to see if any of those ever actually made it out, and I wanted to see if beyond just Europe. And I did find one. In Australia, there's a Tempest. He doesn't move at all, but that was okay. My Quick figures don't move. They're really great. But he's a little short.
I love that in the inaugural episode of articulated points, we are showing some things that don't have articulation.
You know, we're articulating the point that they have no articulation. So I found that he's part of a wave of 5 figures. The 5th figure's a skateboarder that I don't have. Technically, you know, that is an action figure. Those arms kind of move. They're not any useful action, but so they're just tiny and not terribly useful. But if you want a Tempest that, you know, force perspective, you can you can make work. There you go.
So you just have Tempest closer to you at all times.
That's right.
And then everything's fine.
I think it's amusing, though. This is the same Dr. X as interpreted by 2 different branches of McDonald's. So, one of the European releases of Action Man is this guy. He might look familiar to you because he came over here a year later, and all they did was change up the head sculpt. The accessories he comes with are even the same, they just changed the colors.
And his head sculpt wasn't changed in order to change it for the country that it was in. It was changed to reflect the current head sculpt of Action Man. Is that correct?
I think yes, but also by this time the CG Action Man series had come out, not the cell animated one that you can buy over here for really cheap off of Amazon, but a 2-season computer generated cartoon done by the same people who did Reboot, I think. And on there he looks a lot more like this than he does like that. So there you go. There's a very quick and dirty history of Action Man Happy Meal toys.
McDonald's Happy Meals now come with an all-action Action Man or an all-action Furby. Well, who needs action when you can talk Furbish? 4 of each, 2 every week.
I'm sure that that's not the last time you're going to be hearing about Action Man from us. One of the reasons that we mention Action Man, I think, is because it's not familiar to us domestically, since we're both from the United States. And so it's one of the ways that we have been expanding our horizons, something else to look into. And so that's what we're always trying to push ourselves, and that's probably what we're going to be talking about more. We're not going to be telling you, you know, a lineup of what came out in a certain year of G.I. Joe. We're going to be telling you about the things that were more later on for us, things that we learned about later. So definitely more Action Man in the future, I would think, because I really enjoy Action Man. I think that some of the stuff that they did in the 12-inch was really, really creative.
He's a close cousin to G.I. Joe, and it's worth exploring.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a lot of material to work with.
Yeah, it's a little weird how on the shelves at the same time in the United States there was Action Man and there was G.I. Joe, because in a sense it all was just G.I. Joe. And then when you look through the catalogs, you know, they were marketed to the retail buyers together. Like there would be G.I. Joe, and then the next page would be Action Man, and it was, you know, 12-inch G.I. Joe even, and then 12-inch Action Man. And it was very obvious that these things were somehow related, but they were definitely themed differently. You know, Action Man was into his extreme sports.
Yeah, he was kind of the civilian counterpart to G.I. Joe.
So that's about it for Action Man this week. That all was news to me over time. I love hearing the rundown of it again. And maybe actually looking up to get some of those figures myself. I know I already got the 5 POA Action Man, but some of those other ones may actually be good. But I kind of wanted to talk about something that I saw this week. I was happy that I managed to pick this up. It is a Boss Fight Studios Lord VMS figure. Let me see if I can hold it straight to the camera, if I know how to work a camera. I was super excited about this. This was actually the first time that I've gotten to see this figure in person, and it's kind of blowing me away. Of course, it's Boss Fight, so all their stuff is great, but this one I really took to because I knew I was going to like some of the others, but Lord VMS is super awesome. I didn't realize, everybody keeps talking about the Knight of Asperity because of the skull head that is awesome, and it is very worth picking up and worth talking about, but that skull head was also in here with Lord VMS. See how it has that scar above the left eye? Lord VMS himself has the same scar on his face. So, to me, that's what I love in a toy line. Not only do these things look beautiful, and they do, they all look beautiful, the articulation on them is great, but it's also a situation where you pick the thing up and immediately your brain is firing on what exactly the story is behind all these parts, and you know, what would I have done with these as a kid? I think that I would have gone crazy. I probably wouldn't have put this figure down for weeks. As a matter of fact, it would have probably gone on car rides with me all the time because it's just super awesome. Of course, it has all of the boss fight articulation that we've come to expect, but also the fact that, like, I look at this thing and immediately it starts making me think about who the character is that's in my hand and what that's all about and how he fits in with the other characters. That's what I enjoy about this. It's more thought put into it than just looking beautiful, which it also does.
Yeah, there's some world building going on in there.
For sure, for sure. World building is the perfect phrase that I'm looking for. So I love that. I also, of course, picked up a Lance Steelblade, but I was super lucky, and I managed to get these two figures. The Vandar, he's kind of like a barbarian. He is really awesome. It's one of those situations where I think that I may end up needing multiples of these, because not only does he come with multiple heads, but he comes with multiple helmets, and the helmets on the heads kind of make the heads look like a different head, as well as that can work. It's kind of crazy, but it does make me kind of want multiples of these. But the other thing that I picked up is the new gargoyle, the female gargoyle. She is awesome. It's one of those deals where if you think about what a gargoyle looks like, they did it perfectly. Her mouth actually is shaped kind of like a downspout for rain, which, you know, is part of what a gargoyle may be doing on the side of a building. She looks super awesome, but the thing inside this package that really blew me away was her choice of weapon. Basically, she has this club, and it's a really cool looking club, but then you realize that this gargoyle is improvising, because this is the clapper from a bell in a bell tower. There is where it would connect in the top of the bell, and that is the clapper. And I just think that that's amazing.
Quasimodo's going to have some trouble doing his job later.
That's very true. He's going to have some explaining to do. But I think it's wonderful. I mean, the fact that that they think things through to that degree, that in addition to their skills at making sure the figures are articulated as well as they always have been, and that all the things are painted so beautifully, because they are. But from the very beginning, the initial thought is one worth making into a figure, and that's why I really love this stuff. One other thing that I got, and I love this, again, I was a little bit behind, but I was seeing them in person at NJCC, and this is Dead-Eye Duck from Bucky O'Hare. The Boss Fight guys, whenever they actually announced that they were going to be doing some Bucky O'Hare stuff, they inspired me to go back and kind of take a look at Bucky O'Hare again. I do remember the cartoon from whenever that originally aired, but I'd not really watched it, so I gave it a chance, and I enjoyed it. The fact that it comes from Larry Hama was certainly a bonus for a G.I. Joe collector. But the reason why actually that interested me so much, coming from him, is that quite often whenever he's asked, you know, what kind of comic books he enjoyed whenever he was younger, he'll mention Uncle Scrooge. And there's something about the anthropomorphic characters that are in Bucky O'Hare that really make me interested in reading what he's doing there, because it's something that he is doing that reminds him of comics that inspired him from when he was younger. The Boss Fight guys doing the figures and making them amazing made me pick them up. None of these figures disappoint. Actually, whenever you get them out, they usually have points of articulation where I wouldn't expect. I did not expect to get an articulated tail out of Bucky O'Hare, but there it is. And then Dead-Eye Duck, which is my new one. I was not expecting him to have different gun sculpts. I thought, you know, You sculpt the gun, you'll put 4 of them in the package, and you're done. But he actually comes with, it looks to me like 3 different gun sculpts. It looks like you have 2 of them that match, which is kind of cool, because he can hold 2 of them, since he has 4 arms, he can hold 2 of them that match. And then the other 2, you kind of can put them in whichever hand that you think looks most characteristically correct, I would say. He definitely has this main one that he's holding up on the front of the package. It's in there. And it just looks awesome. He's fully articulated. There's not anywhere that he should be that he isn't. And they're smart about the articulation, too. Like, the ankles, he actually just kind of has a ball joint like you would see on a head. And that totally makes sense because his feet, in the design of the initial character, are large enough to kind of hold that. And the fact that they did that makes it a lot easier to pose. It's just, the whole thing is very smart. It goes together well. His neck is a barbell, so his head has full range of motion. It is a beautiful figure. I absolutely recommend it. I love it. And in addition to that, one of the other things that I got from Boss Fight was a couple of blind bags, and maybe I'll be opening those at some point and taking a look to see what we could find in there.
Ooh, a tease for the next episode.
Yeah, maybe.
So what I've got going this week is a blatant attempt for us to gain viewers.
Oh, nice.
I hold in my hand a little box. Now, you might be thinking, much like Brad Pitt, what's in the box? Well, see, for making my segment of Action Man Happy Meal toys, I found that it's not always easy acquiring these figures. See, the figures themselves are cheap on eBay, and they're plentiful, but what gets you is the shipping. It is ridiculous. You'll be paying $20, almost guaranteed, just for shipping. 1 figure, 20 figures. It's really always around $20 shipping. So I've been buying a lot of lots to get the figures that I wanted. And what that means is I have some leftovers. Now, some of those leftovers have already gone to Patrick here, but I still have a box. I'm not going to tell you what's in the box. I want to keep it a little mystery, but know that there are a not insubstantial amount of action figures left over of Action Man in here. So how is this a blatant attempt to get you guys to watch us? Well, it's a bribe. I mean, it's a giveaway. Bribe. It's a bribe.
It's a bribe.
So what we want you to do is to subscribe to our channel and then comment on this video. And that's it. That's all we want from you right now to be able to enter into this. We'll choose a winner at random midnight a week from when this video is posted. So once this video goes up, you'll have about 7 days. Maybe less if, depending on what time of day this video goes up, but midnight a week from when this video goes up. We'll pick a name at random. As long as you've subscribed, as long as you've commented, you're good. So if you are subscribing, make sure you're visible when you subscribe. Otherwise, we can't see that you subscribed, and then we can't know that you're eligible. Winner will be notified by a direct message through YouTube. And once we have that, I will mail out our bribe. So that is my blatant attempt for us to get followers.
Awesome. Okay, that does it for the episode. I hope that everybody isn't bored to tears and that you want to come back next time we post something. We hope to be posting episodes relatively regularly, but we do take some time to edit these, and send us your comments. Hopefully we will hear from both of the people that end up watching this video. So like us, subscribe, and share. Thank you. And that is that.
Thanks for watching this episode of Articulated Points. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'd appreciate it if you would like, share, and subscribe. If you'd like to learn more about some of the toys featured in this episode or want to follow us on social media, links are in the description below this video.